Hi, I'm Ted. Welcome to River Channel, and this video is going to be about building a Wannigan, or Wannigan, I guess. I think it's Wannigan, a kitchen box for canoeing. So you can put all the stuff in there, dry food, pots and pans, basically your kitchen setup, and you can put it in the canoe. So over here, I built it out of cedar, so it's fairly light. It's supposed to make it out of oak or something like that. I've got latches on the side, so you can keep everything tight. The lid comes off. We've got a gasket around the top here to hopefully keep it as weathertight as well. Got some lift out storage bins here that go up the top, and then broke it down here with some 1/4-inch plywood dividers, and so you can keep your gear a little bit more organized. So stay tuned. I'm going to show you how we built it from beginning to end. Alright, we're going to make the rough cuts here for the sides, then we'll come back and do the tops. A lot of times when you glue things up, it seems like they slide a little bit and the ends don't stay perfectly straight. So I'm going to rough cut these about 1 inch longer than they need to be, and then once the panels are all glued up, then I'll go back and I'll cut them to final length. Okay, we've got the panels here that we glued up. Got the ends and the sides, and so I'm going to trim one end of it to get it flush. Then I'm going to measure and then cut it down to size. I'm going to use my my table saw. I got a cross-cut sled here. It works pretty good. You can use a skill saw. I would just encourage you to get a really straight line by, well, unless you can cut straighter than I am. It's hard to do it on just a line for me. I usually put a straight board or straight edge, clamp it in place, and then allow the saw to run along that edge to get a nice straight line. So whichever one works best for you, I'll show you what I do, and we'll get on to the next step. A lot of times there's a little bit of cupping in the boards, in the panels when you glue them up. So I got some, pretty rough. I think this is like 60 or 80 grit sandpaper that I'm used to do a rough sand on these. It'll make it easier to get a cleaner edge when I put it through the router a little bit later. They've got the panels pretty well flat. They're sanded down, not super fine. I'll touch them up a little bit later, but I'm going to use this drawer lock bit on my router. And it creates some grooves like this in the ends so that they fit together in a nice tight joint like that. A lot of glue surface area. So I got these little blocks that I made to set up so that I can just set them in the router table and get the bit set to the right height, and then we'll run the cedar through that. Alright, so I'm going to cut a dado in the bottom of my panels here. I want that floor, I think, about the bottom of it about 1 inch up from the bottom. So I'm going to measure, since this whole thing is 16, I'm going to measure 15 up from my fence. And then of course I'll put it on this side, and that'll give me a dado. I'm going to put a piece of 30 seconds, almost 3/4, 18 millimeter thick plywood as the floor. I like a plywood floor, I think, just because it tends to be closest to the ground, tends to be more susceptible to the water, so hopefully that plywood will deal with the weather a little bit better. I'm also going to make the dado 3/8 of an inch deep. That's about halfway through the 3/4, so that will still preserve the strength, but get a pretty decent purchase with glue. All right, so I'm going to set that up here. I'm going to measure over 15 inches. fit there. Alright, so kind of put the box together and clamped it together just to double check my measurements. Things look like they're fitting pretty good, so we're in pretty good shape so far. We got 18 1/4 that way. $26 1/4 that way, and so I'm just going to add 3/4 of an inch on all around to get my bottom size, because I got the 3/8 dado on each side, and I'm probably going to subtract just a little bit from that just to allow for expansion. And when you put glue in there, it's gonna expand a little bit and swell. So I'm going to make sure that I have a tight enough fit. So let me do some math. All right, the math wasn't that complicated, but I wanted to make sure. So I have 18 1/4 and 26 1/4. Add 3/4 to that. That gives me 19 and 27. And if I subtract an 1/8 inch off from each one of those, just to give me that sort of room for swell, that gives me 18 7/8 by 26 7/8. And that's what I want my dimensions of my bottom to be. Out, so let's dry fit everything, make sure it fits, and then we can glue it up. Right. Okay, we got the box done, and so I want to cut some rails here to install inside the box so I can set some drawers for utensils and things like that on the top of the box. So I cut some, cedar. The drawers are going to be about 3.5. I just use 3.5 or 1x4 stock, which is 3.5 inches tall. So I cut this rail. The 3.5 plus this, I think I get this about 15/16 because that's what I had left for stock to fit that sort of rail in the bottom. I cut another small one that I'll put on the side of the box. And so let's cut some pocket holes. So this cool little jig, it's called Cool little jig here called the Craig jig, and we can set our stock in here and drill some pocket holes which allow us to set it inside of our box. I'm going to attach this bottom rail to the stock here. I'm going to glue it, but I'm going to staple it in place with these 7/8 inch kind of they're all-weather staples that are used for doing cedar shingles outside, so that they won't rust. All right, I got some more cedar stock here I ripped down to 1 3/4. I'm going to cut some rabbets in the side so I can slide some 1/4 inch plywood in between like this to make little dividers, just to keep gear a little bit neat and tidy. So we got, I put a dado blade in the table saw and we'll cut these grooves. Now I'm going to cut some vertical dados in the rails so that I can slide the dividers down through the top right in the spot. All right, I want my drawers to sit just a little down inside. I want them as close as I can to the top so the gear doesn't flop out of them, when the box gets shaken around. But I don't want it too tight up top in case there's any movement in the wood and I can't get the top on. So I cut a little piece of scrap just to check the spacer, and that seems to fit pretty good. That gives me, let's see, what's my measurement on that? At 9 5/8, that gives me just about the right amount of spot. So I'm going to cut my guides here at 9 5/8, install those, and then I can slide in my 1/4 inch plywood dividers here to keep my gear nice and tidy. And I'll Craig jig my ends so that I can attach it both to the rail and the bottom of the box. Alright, so now I'll just line up my grooves and put the little feet on. These pocket screws. So I've measured up 5 1/4 here, which should give me the space I want for my drawers. So I've clamped this sort of rail into place here, and I'm going to put in my screws. I'll use a square to make sure the feet are square, and I'll screw those into the bottom. So my other feet and my other rail I'm going to put in, and I've got these pockets holes at the end, but now I'm thinking since these are going right in the edge, I can probably just glue them in and then use the stapler. Probably be just as strong and faster. Okay, you got this 1/2 inch stock that I'm going to use for the drawers. It doesn't have to be super rugged, so I like the lighter weight of using a smaller dimension lumber. So I'm going to cut these to length, and then you could use lap joints to join the box or the drawers together, or you could use the Craig jig. Actually works pretty well, but I just kind of like the looks of the drawer lock bit that we used for the sides of the box. So I'm going to do the exact same process, cut these to length, run them through the drawer lock bit, and then we can glue them up. And well, we got to cut the grooves for the bottoms, and I'll show how to do that. But let's cut these to length, and we'll run it through the drawer lock bed and the router table. I got all my drawer pieces cut, so now I'm going to cut the rabbet for the bottoms, and I like to put it, since it's 1/2 inch stock, I want about halfway, so I got my blade set about 1/4 inch up, and about a little over 1/4 inch up from the bottom. Right, I also want to subdivide my drawers into thirds so I can put little dividers in for utensils and things like that. So divided into thirds, I get little marks here. I'm just going to carry these marks across each one, and I can put on a cross-cut sled here and cut my dados that way. All right, I want to put some holes in the sides of the drawers there so it can have a place to grab your, put your fingers in and pick them up. So I got an 1.25 inch spade bit in the drill press here, and I marked out the center on the sides, and we'll drill them out. Okay, I want rounded edges within the holes here. I'm going to pick it up just to be softer on the fingers, and then I want to round over the edges of the top too, just to kind of limit splinters a little bit and have it splintering when it bangs into stuff. So I got a 3/8 inch round over bit in the router table, and we'll soften them up. Okay, now we cut the drawer bottoms. I like to measure the inside dimensions and then add a 1/2 inch, to extend into the rabbets, and then subtract a 1/16 just to give it a little bit of wiggle room in here. So I'm going to set that up, and we'll rip down the floor, the bottoms. Okay, so we finished up the drawers, and so we've got a couple more pieces that we need to finish putting together our box. I cut 4 feet here just out of 2 inch oak, and I rounded off the edges, and we'll put these on the bottom just to keep them up off the ground. I cut 2 pieces of oak here, same thing, 2 by 5, 2 by oak. That again, it's just scraps I had kicking around the shop. I'm gonna round this over, put it with cove bit, and put a cove in here for a handle. So 2 of those, and I got 4 of these little squares, a 3-inch by 2-inch, and I'm going to use those to build out the sides a little bit so we can put the latches on it, so the latches will be flush with the apron. So cut those and rounded those all off of that same round over bit that we had in the router table, and so we can get ready to put these on. And I'm going to countersink each one of those feet, and then I'm going to pre-drill into the yoke so it doesn't split. All right, I get my handles for the box. We're back to work today. Just some 2x oak. I had a couple scrap pieces kicking around, so I rounded off the edges, and I've got a 1/2-inch cove bit in the router table that I'm going to put a little groove in for your fingers to lift it up. So it's been nice to have sort of one piece to run it through all at once, but a couple pieces of scrap, that'll work. We'll start with light passes and gradually raise the bit. Okay, get everything sanded up, and before I put the latches on and the handles, I want to seal the box because I want to put a gasket at the top, and I want to make sure I get the right height, you know, with that gasket sitting on top. Put the handles on, and I want to seal it before I put the gasket on. So I got this Spar Minwax urethane, indoor outdoor. Hopefully that'll be pretty rugged. I don't really like using oil-based stuff. It's just it takes forever to dry, and I can't spray it as well. So I'm going to use my sprayer and put this on, and then we'll let it dry and put on the latches. All right, I got 2 coats on this, and then I'm going to put this gasket on, this rubber window seal. I used it on another one that seemed to work pretty well. So I'm just going to stick this on top of this, then I can get the top on, and I can measure kind of where I want my handles and my latch blocks, and we'll get that going. Okay, I've got these latches here that lock the top on. Be kind of useful if you're paddling some white water. And so we got to make it flush, so we're going to put a block on like this so we can put that latch on. And I got the gasket on there, so I want to be able to compress it. So I'm going to push that down. Put a mark there. And I'll do the same thing on the other side, and that's how we'll set up where those blocks go. Already measured in about 3 inches from the edge. I got my square to square them up. I'm going to glue them for now, put a couple 7/8 staples in just to hold them in place, and I'll go back and put some 1 1/4 all-weather screws in them to hold them. Put my handle about 1 inch down from the lid so I put a mark where the lid was. I'm going to measure down an inch and then find the center, and I'm going to clamp the handle on because the oak's pretty hard. I have to pre-drill some holes, put some put some screws into it, probably 2-inch screws to hold the handles on. 19.5, and measure down, put a line, put some glue in the back side of this. I'm going to clamp it in place so that it will stay put while I re-drill it, get some screws in there. Okay, I got about 5-6 coats of that spar varnish on the box here. I want to keep it pretty weather tight, so I put a bunch of coats on. And now I want to compress the top down, compress that gasket to get the latches on. So put my planer up there, which is pretty heavy, and that'll hopefully compress it. So I want to pre-drill the holes just a little bit because it's hard sometimes to get the screws directly in the center of the hole of the lasp. So I got this little drill bit here, a little spring-loaded tip on the end. Helps me center it, and I'm not going to drill it very deep because the screws are tiny. But I want to just get it started just a little bit so that those screws set in the center of the holes here. So I'm going to line that up in the center. Like that. Just get that started just a tiny bit. Of course, there's a knot right there. Get to drill that just a little bit deeper. Get that started. Maybe I can push that in a little bit. There we go, that's better. So now that and that. Good, we'll repeat for the other 3 latches and we'll have a secure top. Alright, so we got the completed Wannigan kitchen box here. Let's get the latches undone. You can pull off the lid. Got a couple different compartments here. I cut some 1/4-inch plywood here just as dividers for the hand holders, and these actually can come out if you want to clean it. This one comes out. And I also cut some 1/4-inch dividers here that can come out if you want to clean it. That way you can divide on this stuff if you want. And then over here is more of a taller if you want to put some taller things underneath the door. So we've got some oak handles here so you can lift it. Of course, the challenge with these always is because it's pretty big, you can put a lot of stuff in it, then you can barely lift it. So you got to be careful with that. But that's it. Great thing to do for car camping, or again, I got the gasket on there for canoe camping, so it should stay pretty dry. I can't guarantee how it will be if it actually swims down the entire river, but I've been holding up pretty well. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. And again, hit the like button if you can, and consider subscribing. Until next time, hope you're having fun on the river.